Hello all. Today we are going to discuss research and citation. Specifically, we are going to gain an understanding of the different types of sources, discuss the seriousness of plagiarism, learn how to properly format a works cited page, explain the difference between quotations and paraphrases, and examine how to use in-text or parenthetical citations to cite our sources within paragraphs. Part of composing persuasive paragraphs is incorporating research into our papers through the use of citations. This process of research and citation is fairly complex. Therefore, before we begin this lecture, I want to give a brief outline of its content in order to help us conceptualize what we are discussing and where we are heading. We are going to begin with a discussion of different types of sources. We will then proceed to an examination of plagiarism and its significance. Once we understand the importance of properly citing our sources, we will discuss the two places where citation occurs within a paper, the works cited page and in-text or parenthetical citations. Within the works cited page, we will discuss how to cite the most common sources, including journal articles, online newspapers and magazines, books, and websites. Finally, we will conclude this lecture with a discussion of the differences between quotations and paraphrases, and how to cite them within our paragraphs. Let's begin by discussing the various types of sources that are available. When researching, there are three different degrees or quality levels of sources that we may find. They are unreliable sources, reliable sources, and scholarly or peer-reviewed sources. As you can see, these sources are arranged from worst at the bottom to best at the top. Let's discuss each of these levels, beginning with unreliable sources. Unreliable sources are the worst form of evidence. Currently, the most prolific source of unreliable information is the internet. While excellent and reliable information can be found online, the vast majority of websites are unreliable. All that is required to create a .com website is a computer and a domain name. Anyone can literally post anything regardless of its validity. Therefore, aside from a few exceptions, any website that ends in .com should be considered unreliable. However, the internet can provide some reliable sources as well, some of which are .com websites. First, there are many major news networks and financial companies that have .com websites that also provide useful information. The New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and financial websites like Bloomberg or Forbes all have information that would be considered reliable. You can also find reliable information on governmental websites, the URLs of which will generally end in .gov. In addition to major news outlets and government sites, some reliable information may be found on organization websites as well. These usually end in .org. However, we must be careful using this information. Many organizations have specific agendas, and therefore the information they provide may be inaccurate or taken out of context. Whenever taking evidence from a supposedly reliable source, we should always double-check its validity by cross-referencing the information with other reputable sites. Finally, in addition to reliable internet sites, you can also find reliable information in books, newspapers, magazines, and company records. However, as with .orgs, we should always check the validity of this information. Just because something has been printed does not necessarily mean that it is accurate. You can find books written by experts in the field, but you can also find books that discuss first-hand accounts of UFO abductions. Regardless of the source that you are using, it is important to be skeptical. Always verify the accuracy of your information, even if it's from a reliable source. The best form of evidence, however, are scholarly or peer-reviewed sources. Scholarly or peer-reviewed sources go through a rigorous vetting process by experts in the field before they can be published. An individual who wants to be published in a scholarly journal or by a university press must first submit the manuscript to a panel of experts in the field who evaluate the validity of the claims. The panel then either rejects the manuscript or critiques it and returns it to the submitter for revision. This process continues until the panel of experts agree that the manuscript's evidence, arguments, and findings are sound. Then and only then is the manuscript published. Because of this intense vetting process, scholarly journal articles and books published by university presses are the gold standard of evidence. These sources should be used whenever possible as they possess the most reliable information. By understanding the different quality levels of sources, we can ensure that we select the best information for our reports. Now that we have discussed types of sources, we will move on to a discussion of plagiarism and citation. One of the most important aspects of writing is distinguishing our personal words and ideas from those of other sources, such as journal articles, newspapers, magazines, and other reliable sources. Failure to clearly distinguish and give credit to the words or ideas of another individual is called plagiarism and can result in severe penalties, not only in an academic setting, but also in a job. If you are caught plagiarizing in an academic setting, you may receive a 0 on an assignment, or you may even be expelled from school. The consequences for plagiarizing during your career can also be dramatic. If you plagiarize a report while on the job, you can be demoted or even fired. Plagiarism is stealing. You would not walk into somebody's house and steal a computer. We should be just as horrified by taking the words or ideas of another person without giving him or her credit. In the remainder of this lecture, we are going to discuss how to give original authors credit through proper citation. Citing our evidence creates a link that joins our use of the information within our paper to the original source where we found the information. This link allows the reader to find the original source and validate whether or not we are accurately representing the information. Citing information within a paper is a twofold process. First, we have to cite the source within a works cited page. In addition to creating a works cited page, we also need to distinguish our words and ideas from our source's words and ideas within our paragraphs of the paper. This is accomplished through the inclusion of in-text or parenthetical citations. In order to accurately incorporate outside information within our report, we must properly cite the source within both the works cited page and a parenthetical citation. Let's begin by examining how to properly cite a works cited page. Here we have a sample works cited page. Before we look at the specific citations, let's discuss the general formatting. If you are using any outside information within a report, you must include a works cited page at the end of the document. The citations should begin on a new page. In other words, don't begin the citations on the same page as the conclusion of your paper. The page should start with the words works cited. After the words works cited, we will have a list of sources that are used within the paper. If you use information from a source within your paper, whether it is a direct quote, a paraphrase, or merely a specific idea, you must, I repeat, you must have a citation for that source within your works cited page. Also, your works cited page should only contain sources that have been used within your paper. In other words, if you did not use a source within the paper, that source should not be cited within the works cited page. Please note that everything on the works cited page is double-spaced. Each source on the page is differentiated by the use of hanging indents. As you can see, the first line of each citation is left-aligned, while the subsequent lines of each citation are indented. Please note that the sources are arranged in alphabetical order by the first word of the citation, whether that word is the author's last name or the title of a text. Now that we have covered the general layout of the works cited page, let's look at how to cite specific sources within this page. As we previously discussed, peer-reviewed journal articles are the gold standard of credibility. Therefore, we should be familiar with the citation format of these sources. Let's take a look at the first source of this works cited page, which is from a scholarly journal. For scholarly journal articles, we will begin with the author's name. The author's last name is presented first. We then include a comma, after which we provide the author's last name. Finally, we end the author portion of the citation with a period. If the journal you are citing has 2 or more authors, its citation would look like this. Here, at the Chobatar Kali, all the subsequent authors' names are separated by commas. The subsequent authors' names are presented first and then last. Once we have provided all the author information, we then need to provide the title of the article. Before we give the article title, we include opening quotation marks. We then provide the article title itself. Generally, we capitalize all nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs in the title. We then include a period and closing quotes. After providing the article title, we then give the journal title. The journal title is capitalized normally and is given in italics. The journal title section is then concluded with a comma. The journal title is followed by the volume and issue number. You will include lowercase letters VOL followed by a period, and the volume number for that particular article. You will then include the lowercase letters NO followed by a period and the issue number. Commas separate the volume and issue number and end this section. The final portions of the scholarly source citation are the year of publication and the page numbers of the article. After providing the year of publication and a comma, we then abbreviate page numbers with PP period and give the all-inclusive page numbers on which the article can be found. Finally, we end the citation with a period. By providing this set of information in this order, we make it easy for a reader to find and validate the information that you're providing from scholarly sources. Before we proceed on to discussing how to cite books and websites, let's quickly examine how to cite newspaper articles, as that process is very similar to a journal article. Here we have a citation for an online newspaper. For citing an online newspaper article or magazine article, there are only a few differences from the citation of a journal article. We will begin with the author information. We start with the author's last name, insert a comma, provide the author's first name, and then end the author section with a period. Once we have provided the author information, we then provide the article title. Before providing the title, we insert open quotation marks. We then provide the title itself, being sure to capitalize all nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. We then end the article title section with a period and closing quotes. Next, we provide the title of the magazine or newspaper from which the article comes. The title of the newspaper or magazine where the article was found is given in italics and followed by a comma. We then give the publication date for the article. We begin with the day the article was published, followed by the month. Please note that if the month is more than 4 letters long, we abbreviate it and follow it with a period. We then provide the year of publication. Finally, we end this section with a comma. Next, we provide the URL for the article. After providing the URL, we add a period. The citation then ends with the word accessed and the day, month, and year that we accessed the article online. This citation is then closed with a period. Now that we have an understanding of how to cite journal articles and online newspaper and magazine articles, let's quickly look at how to cite a book. The formatting for a book is fairly simple. We start with the author information. We begin by providing the author's last name, followed by a comma, and then give the author's first name. We end this section with a period. Next, we present the title of the book. This title will adhere to the same rules as journal titles. That is, we will capitalize all nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. We will also italicize the titles of books. When we have given the title, we will end this section with a period. After the title, we will provide the name of the publishing company. It is important to note if the publishing company has the word university or press within its name, we abbreviate these words to U and P respectively. We then follow the publisher name with a comma. We then end book citations with the year of publication and a period. We'll conclude our discussion of works cited page entries with a discussion of how to cite a web page. Here we have a sample citation for a web page. Generally, a web page will begin with the web page's author. We will provide the author's last name, followed by a comma. We will then give the author's first name and end this section with a period. Once we have provided the author information, we will then provide the title of the web page itself. Before providing the title of the web page, we insert opening quotation marks. We then provide the title of the web page, being sure to capitalize all nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. We then end the web page title section with a period and closing quotes. It is important to note there are times when you may not be able to find an author for a web page. In that instance, we begin the entry with the web page title, like this. After providing the title of the web page and its author, if available, we then provide the name of the web site. The web site's name is given in italics. Be sure to capitalize all nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs within this title. We then end this section with a comma. Next, we give the publication date. The publication date of the page will begin with the day, then the month, and finally the year. If the month is more than 4 letters long, abbreviate it. If you do not have the specific day or month a page was created, merely provide the information that you do have. For instance, if we could only find the year for this publication, we would merely insert 2019. If you cannot find any publication date information, merely leave this section blank. For this source, however, all the information is given, so we do need to provide it. The publication date section is then concluded with a comma. Next, we will provide the URL. The URL of the web page is given and then followed with a period. Finally, we provide the date that we accessed the article online. We type the word accessed and then give the day, month, and year that we accessed the web page. If the month is more than 4 letters long, we should abbreviate it. We will then end the citation with a period. While there are many other sources that can be used within a paper, having an understanding of how to create a works cited page for these common sources will give you a good foundation upon which to proceed with your research. Now that we have discussed how to cite sources within a works cited page, we can move on to in-text or parenthetical citations. An in-text citation is provided directly within a paper's paragraph. This citation usually includes the name or names of the authors and the specific page number from which the information comes, if the source has page numbers. While the purpose of a works cited page is to help us locate the source, the purpose of an in-text citation is threefold. First, an in-text citation serves as a link to the works cited page. Instead of providing all of the publication information for a source directly within a paper, an in-text citation provides an abbreviated reference. From this abbreviated form, the reader can then find the full citation in the works cited page, which will allow him or her to find the original source. Secondly, an in-text citation indicates what specific information within our paper is coming from an outside source. When using other people's words or ideas, it is important that we clearly differentiate our thoughts and words from those of outside sources. In-text citations allow us to demarcate our ideas from others. Finally, in-text citations ease the validation process by providing the page number from which the information comes. Instead of having to read through a 100-page book or a 30-page journal article, including an in-text citation with a page number allows the reader to directly access the specific page where the information can be found. Before examining how parenthetical citations are used within paragraphs, we should first know that there are two ways information can be incorporated within our paragraphs. The first method is through quotations. A quotation is used when we are copying portions of a source verbatim, or word for word, from the original. Anytime we use the exact same words as another person, we must, I repeat, we must put the directly quoted words in quotation marks. The second method of incorporating information is through paraphrases. Within a paraphrase, we are using an idea from a source, but we are putting that idea into our own words. Therefore, while the idea remains the same, the presentation of that idea is unique. While quotations are easy to create, we merely take the original author's words. The creation of paraphrases is more difficult and deserves special consideration. Let's pretend that we have found this quotation and that we want to create a paraphrase of this quote and incorporate it within our report. When creating paraphrases, there are two important changes that need to be made. First, we must change the wording of the original. As we previously indicated, any words that are taken verbatim from a source must be put in quotation marks. Therefore, in order to create a paraphrase, we must change the wording of the original. Otherwise, we would be dealing with a quote. Secondly, we must change the sentence structure of the original as well. Merely changing the original words to synonyms does not create a strong paraphrase and would still be considered plagiarism. In order to properly paraphrase a source, we must also change the sentence structure of the original. Let's take a look at an example paraphrase. I am first going to read through the original. I will then read through the paraphrase. As I read, pay attention to any identical wording. The writing process is extremely complex and time-consuming. Before one even begins to write, he or she must thoroughly plan the progression of the piece. Next, the individual must write the first draft and then spend countless hours revising and editing not only the content, but also the style and word choice of the piece. Now I'll read the paraphrase. According to Johnson, the composition process is very difficult and time-intensive. Before writing, one must contemplate the layout of an essay. Subsequently, a person writes the first draft and then spends a considerable amount of time revising and editing the information and the nuances of the style and wording of the essay. Within this paraphrase, there is some wording that is identical to the original. Since this section is identical within both passages, this paraphrase contains plagiarism and needs to be adjusted. This paraphrase is also flawed because it fails to change the sentence structure of the original. Instead, it merely switches out the original words for synonyms. Listen as I alternate reading between these two passages. The writing process is extremely complex and time-consuming. The composition process is very difficult and time-intensive. Before one even begins to write, he or she must thoroughly plan the progression of the piece. Before one can write, one must seriously contemplate the layout of an essay. As you can hear, the sentence structures and cadence of each of these passages is similar. A thorough paraphrase will not only change the words of the original, but also its sentence structure. Let's look at another example. Here we have an example paraphrase that changes both the wording of the original and its sentence structure. According to Johnson, the planning, writing, and revision of a paper takes time and dedication. From the planning of a paper to its revision, a student can spend many hours producing a final, polished product. The best advice for creating strong paraphrases is to read the original while noting its important ideas. Then pursue some other task for 5 minutes. Once that time has elapsed, try to compose a summary from memory. Noting the important ideas of a passage and then stepping away from the original for a protracted period of time will help you to create a paraphrase and avoid inadvertent plagiarism. In conclusion, it is important to know not only the difference between quotations and paraphrases, but also how to create a thoroughly changed paraphrase for our paper. Now that we have discussed the difference between quotations and paraphrases, we can examine how to create and use parenthetical citations for both of these within our paragraphs. Let's begin by examining how to integrate quotations within our paragraphs. Here, we have an example paragraph from a report that incorporates 2 quotations. Within this paragraph, we have 2 sets of quotation marks, indicating that we have taken the blue portions from this paragraph word for word from the original. If we went to these original sources, we would find that the blue portion is directly copied. However, merely putting quotation marks around directly quoted material is not enough to cite the information properly. Our reader also needs to know where this information is taken from. In order to provide this information, we must include a parenthetical citation. For scholarly journal articles, books, and printed newspapers or magazines, there are 2 pieces of information that must be provided within the paragraph: the author and the page number from which the information comes. There are 2 ways that this information can be presented within a paragraph. In order to help us compare these ways, let's just examine the sentences that have quotations. Here, within the first sentence, we can see that the composer of the report has indicated the original author's name and the page number from which the quotation comes. Please note that after the author, there is no punctuation. We merely provide the page number. All of this information is provided within parentheses at the end of the sentence. If this source had 2 authors, we would include both authors' last names within the parenthetical citation, separated by the word "and", as shown here. If the source has 3 or more authors, we will include at the first author's name followed by et al., as is shown here. Et al. Merely means "and others" in Latin. Finally, it is important to note the location of the parenthetical citation. It comes after the closing quotes, but before the period. This positioning is very logical when one considers sentence structure. As this citation is not part of the original wording of the quote, we cannot put the quotation marks after the citation itself. Also, since the citation is part of the sentence, it must come before the period. Before we move on to the second way to incorporate a parenthetical citation, remember that one of the purposes of the parenthetical citation is to direct us to the appropriate source in our works cited page. If we examine the sources in our works cited page, which are in alphabetical order, we should find a source by Chobatar. This link between the in-text citation and the works cited page allows the reader to find the original source, go to page 8, and see if this quotation really exists. Let's now compare the parenthetical citation in this first example to our second example. Like the first sentence, our second sentence also presents the original author's name and the page number from which the quotation comes. Some of this information has changed its location and is no longer at the end of the sentence. The reason for this shift is that the second example uses the author's name directly within the sentence, whereas the first example does not mention the author until the parenthetical citation. When we mention the author's name directly within the sentence, our presentation of the parenthetical information changes. Since we have already given the author's name within the sentence, we only need to provide the page number from which the quotation comes within our parenthetical citation. As far as indicating multiple authors directly within a sentence, the same rules apply. In summary, regardless of whether we use the author's name directly within the sentence or save it for the parenthetical citation, we must provide this specific set of information, author name and page number, for any information that is coming from a scholarly journal article, book, or paginated newspaper or magazine. Let's now examine a paragraph that implements paraphrases. Here we have a paragraph that is implementing a paraphrase. We know this because of the incorporation of an in-text citation near the end of the paragraph. We also know that the information preceding this in-text citation is a paraphrase because no quotation marks are used. However, there is special consideration that needs to be taken when incorporating paraphrases within paragraphs. When incorporating quotations within paragraphs, it is easy to identify the information that is being cited. It is the information between the quotation marks. However, when incorporating a paraphrase into a paragraph, we do not have quotation marks to indicate where the information begins and ends. Within this paragraph, we know that this paraphrase ends at the parenthetical citation. However, we do not know how far back this citation is referencing. It could be referencing the previous sentence, the previous 2 sentences, or even the previous 3 sentences. Without an initial signal to the reader that indicates where the paraphrase begins, it is impossible to know how far back this citation goes. Therefore, when incorporating paraphrases within paragraphs, we must provide an initial signal to our reader that indicates where the paraphrase begins. The easiest way to do this is by including the author's name directly within the sentence. By including the author's name directly within the sentence where the paraphrase begins, the reader then knows that everything from Johnson to 92 is a paraphrase of Johnson's ideas. Along with changing the wording and sentence structure of the original when creating paraphrases, we must clearly indicate the beginning and ending of a paraphrase when we incorporate it within a paragraph. Before concluding this lecture, let's quickly look at how to cite a website that does not have an author or page numbers within a parenthetical citation. When citing websites that do not have authors or page numbers, there are a few elements that need to be kept in mind. First, we must remember that the parenthetical citation is a link to the works cited page and must align with the first piece of information for that source as is indicated in the works cited page. In other words, if this is our works cited page citation, the parenthetical citation must align with the first piece of information within the works cited page, which is, in this case, the title. Please note that when we do not have an author, we do not need to include the entire title of the source within the parenthetical citation. We only need to include 3 or 4 words. Also note that within the parenthetical citation, the title of the web page is in quotation marks, as it is in the works cited page. Also note, web pages rarely have page numbers. Therefore, we do not include a page number within a parenthetical citation. When using quotations, this lack of a page number is not an issue, as we have the ending quotes to signify where the outside information terminates. However, as we discussed earlier, when we use paraphrases, we must clearly indicate where the paraphrased information begins and ends. The easiest way to do this with websites is to use the website's name directly within the sentence to indicate where the paraphrase begins. We can then use the web page name within the parenthetical citation to indicate where the information ends. By providing the website's name directly within the sentence, we clearly indicate that everything from pheasantsforever.org to the parenthetical citation is paraphrased. Within this lecture, we have covered a significant amount of information that ranges from finding reliable information to creating a works cited page entries for common sources to properly incorporating in-text citations through the use of quotations and paraphrases. While extensive, the information provided here will not only help you avoid plagiarism, but also ethically incorporate sources within your paper.